She could have walked away. No one would have blamed her. But one act of kindness in a dark alley tied her fate to a Mafia empire. And in 3 days, that decision would turn her entire world upside down. Before we go back to how it all began, don't forget to subscribe and share this story. Because what happens next will prove sometimes the smallest act of kindness can change everything. Rain tapped against cracked pavement like the city itself was whispering secrets. The alley behind the diner stank of old grease and cold rain, and the buzzing streetlight overhead flickered as if it was dying too. That's where Sarah Means sat, her back to the brick wall, 12 wrinkled dollars clutched in her hand. Her last $12. She'd been saving them for a hot meal, or maybe a bed in a shelter, just one night off the street. But when you've only got $12 left in the world, every decision feels like gambling your soul. She looked at the bills for a long moment, stomach twisting with hunger. "Just one more night, Sarah," she whispered. "One more night." But life doesn't wait for people like her. It tests them. That's when she heard it. A sound that didn't belong to the rain, a groan, deep and ragged, from farther down the alley. She froze. Then, curiosity, or maybe compassion, pushed her to her feet. "Hello?" she called. No answer. Then a man stumbled out from behind a dumpster, tall and silver-haired, his white shirt torn and soaked with blood. He tried to speak, but collapsed hard onto the wet ground. Sarah's first instinct was to step back. She didn't know this man, didn't owe him anything, but something inside her wouldn't let her walk away. "Can you hear me?" she said, kneeling beside him. His eyes fluttered open, gray, sharp, even through the haze of pain. "Go away." "Not happening," she said. "You're bleeding. You don't even know who I am." "Doesn't matter." And it didn't. His clothes screamed money, but his face was just human. She tore her old shirt into strips and pressed it against his side, whispering, "Hold still." When he started fading, he pushed his phone into her hands. "Call Tony. Speed dial 1. She hesitated, then pressed the button. A gravelly voice answered, "Who is this?" "I found this man. He's hurt. He needs help." "Where?" She told him. The line went dead. A chill ran through her. What kind of people hang up like that? Moments later, black cars glided into the alley, headlights slicing through the rain. Men in coats and gloves stepped out. Their movements sharp, practiced. One knelt beside the wounded man. "Boss!" he shouted. Sarah's heart jumped. "Boss?" Before she could move, the man, barely conscious, reached out and grabbed her wrist. "Your name," he rasped. "Sarah." His eyes softened for a second. "Don't disappear." Then he was gone, loaded into a car that vanished into the storm. Sarah stood there trembling, soaked to the bone, clutching the blood-stained rag she'd used to save his life. Her $12 were gone, spent on bandages and bottled water from the all-night pharmacy. Would you have done the same? Given away your last $12 to help a stranger who might not even make it till morning? The city didn't care either way. But in 3 days, she'd learned that one choice, one act of stubborn compassion, could rewrite her whole life. If you'd have made the same choice Sarah did, hit subscribe and turn on the bell, because her story's just getting started. The night she gave everything away, Vertigi, was only the beginning. Morning came gray and cold beneath the overpass. The roar of traffic above sounded like waves crashing, constant, uncaring. Sarah woke shivering under her coat, the city's chill already creeping into her bones. Her stomach hurt. Hunger was a familiar ache by now. She lay still, staring at the cracked concrete, and let her mind drift backward. Before all this, she'd had a job. Cashier at a grocery store, a small apartment, a rhythm, but one layoff turned into eviction. One temporary stay with a friend became the start of nowhere. Then came silence from home. Her mother's last words had been, "You're too soft for this world." Maybe she was right. Now Sarah's world was the street. Cardboard beds, bus stops, and counting coins until her hands went numb. But that night, that man, she couldn't stop thinking about him. His face, his voice, the way he'd said, "Don't disappear." Who was he really? By noon, she sat outside a cafe, watching strangers with warm coats and paper cups. Her reflection in the window looked like a ghost. "Got any spare change?" she asked a passing man. He didn't look at her. She sighed. What was I thinking? Helping him? What if he was— "Sarah means," a voice interrupted. She looked up. Two men in black coats stood over her, one tall, one silent. Her throat tightened. "Who's asking?" "The man whose life you saved," said the taller one. He opened a black umbrella over her head. "Mr. Stout wants to see you." She shook her head. "You've got the wrong person." He smiled faintly. "You spent $12 on bandages and water from East Avenue Pharmacy, 2:14 a.m. He remembers everything." She froze. "You're Tony." "That's right." Would you have trusted him? Or would you have run, no questions asked? Because every instinct in Sarah screamed for her to run. But something else, something she couldn't name, whispered, "Go." Tony gestured to a black car idling at the curb. "Please, he wants to thank you." She stared at the door. The tinted windows looked like mirrors hiding secrets. "What if I say no?" "Then I wait," Tony said, almost kindly. But I wouldn't. Rain started falling again. Sarah exhaled. "Fine, I'll go." Inside, the car smelled of leather and silence. The city blurred past as they drove. Her reflection in the glass looked pale, anxious, alive. Maybe she was making a mistake. Or maybe, for once, fate was turning her way. Would you have gotten in that car? Tell me in the comments, because Sarah just stepped into a world she doesn't belong in, and one she might never escape. Hit subscribe if you're still with her. The mansion loomed through the fog like a memory of another life. Iron gates opened to a driveway lined with glowing lamps and statues that watched in silence. Sarah pressed her hands together, her heart pounding. "This is his house?" Tony nodded. "Welcome to Mr. Stout's world." Inside, everything gleamed. Marble floors, gold fixtures, chandeliers dripping light. The air smelled of cigars and wealth. Men in suits lined the walls, watching her like hawks. "Are you sure I'm supposed to be here?" she whispered. Tony gave a half-smile. "He doesn't invite people by mistake." They reached a heavy oak door. Tony paused, his tone serious. "He's waiting. Don't be nervous." Easy for him to say. The door opened. Robert Stout sat by the fire, wrapped in a robe, a bandage visible beneath his shirt. Even wounded, he radiated control, like a man used to bending the world to his will. When his gray eyes lifted to her, Sarah forgot how to breathe. "Miss Means," he said, his voice smooth as smoke. "You look better without the rain." She swallowed. "You remember me?" "How could I forget?" He gestured to a chair. Sit. She hesitated. I'd rather stand. He smirked. Defiant. Interesting. Tony shifted behind her. Boss? Quiet, Stout said, never breaking eye contact with Sarah. She saved my life, Tony. The least we can do is let her speak. I didn't save you for payment, Sarah blurted. I just… He raised a hand. I know. That's what makes this curious. Her voice wavered. I don't want anything from you. He leaned forward. Most people walk away from blood. You didn't. His words hung in the air like smoke. She didn't know what to say. Tony shifted again. Boss, people have used kindness before. It's a trick? Enough, Stout said. You think she risked her life for strategy? He reached into a drawer and slid a white envelope across the table. For your $12. She opened it. 10 crisp $100 bills. Her breath caught. I can't take this. You can, he said simply, and you should. She pushed it back toward him. No. His expression softened, almost amused. You realize no one says no to me. Then maybe they should, she said quietly. He studied her for a long moment, then smiled, the kind of smile that looked rare on his face. You're rarer than gold, Sarah means. Would you have taken the money? Or walked away like she just did, not knowing what refusing a man like Robert Stout might cost you? Outside, thunder rolled across the city. Sarah didn't know it yet, but tonight she'd left with something far more dangerous than money, his attention. If you're still with Sarah, hit subscribe and turn on the bell, because it is getting more interesting, and she is about to learn that even kindness has consequences when it touches power. The rain had stopped by the time Sarah reached the alley again, but the world still smelled of it, metal, oil, and quiet despair. Her steps echoed softly against the wet bricks, each one heavier than the last. The mansion felt like a dream now, too clean, too bright, too far from this life. She'd sat across from the most powerful man in the city, refused his money, and somehow walked out alive. But now, back among the trash bins and flickering streetlights, she felt more lost than ever. She slid down the wall, pulling her coat tighter. The cold didn't bother her as much as the silence did. Every shadow seemed to shift. Every whisper of wind sounded like footsteps. Was she being watched? She laughed under her breath. Get a grip, Sarah. But the truth was, she was right. A man across the street adjusted his hat, murmuring softly into an earpiece. Another leaned against a lamppost, pretending to smoke. Tony's men. Watching, reporting, protecting, or monitoring. Upstairs, miles away, Robert Stout stood in his study, staring at an old framed photo. A woman with soft eyes. A little girl, smiling between them. His wife, Elena. His daughter, Grace, both gone. He ran a hand over his jaw, his reflection flickering in the window's glass. She reminds me of you, he murmured to the photo. That same look, like the world hasn't beaten her yet. Tony knocked lightly on the door. You wanted me, boss? Stout didn't turn. You're watching her? Yes, sir. Good. Keep it quiet. Find out who she was before the streets took her. Family, friends, everything. Tony hesitated. You think she's trouble? Stout looked down at the photo again. No, I think she's something else. But if I'm wrong, I need to know before it costs us. Tony nodded. Understood. Back in the alley, night bled into deeper dark. Sarah shivered beneath her coat, clutching her backpack like it held more than 2 shirts and a worn notebook. Her eyes were heavy, but she couldn't sleep. Every creak of the city made her flinch. Then she heard them, voices, low and ugly. "Hey, sweetheart," one slurred. "What's in the bag?" Two men stepped out of the shadows. Junkies, jittery and desperate. One held a broken bottle, the other a grin that didn't reach his eyes. "Nothing worth your time," Sarah said quietly, standing. "Let's see, anyway." The one with the bottle lunged. Sarah swung her backpack at him, the impact knocking him sideways. The other grabbed her arm. She twisted, fought, kicked, but they were stronger, fueled by desperation. "Please, don't!" Before she could finish, headlights flooded the alley. A car door slammed. Tony's voice cut through the chaos. "Walk away!" The junkies froze. One tried to run, but two men in black appeared from nowhere, blocking the exit. The sound of retreating footsteps echoed as the attackers vanished into the night. Sarah pressed herself against the wall, shaking. "You followed me!" Tony stepped closer, rain dripping from his coat. "Mr. Stout said you don't sleep in alleys anymore." She blinked at him. "What's that supposed to mean?" He tossed her something, a small metal key attached to a tag. "Motel on 9th, rooms paid for, 1 night." "I didn't ask for this," she said, voice trembling. "No," Tony replied, "but you needed it." Her throat tightened. Pride told her to throw the key back, to tell him she didn't want anyone's charity. But pride didn't keep you warm, and pride didn't stop hands that shook from hunger. "Why is he doing this?" she asked softly. Tony looked away. "Maybe because you did something nobody else would." He turned, walking back toward the car. "Get some sleep, Sarah. Someone'll check on you in the morning." As the taillights disappeared, the alley fell silent again. Sarah stared at the key in her palm, the metal catching the streetlight just enough to shine. Would you have taken it? Or would you have clung to your pride, even if it meant freezing another night under the overpass? She sighed, tucking the key into her pocket. "Just 1 night," she whispered. "That's all." But deep down, she knew that once you accepted help from a man like Robert Stout, nothing stayed simple. If you'd have taken that key too, hit subscribe and turn on the bell, because Sarah's about to learn that every favor in Robert Stout's world comes with a shadow. 3 days passed before Sarah saw the black car again. It pulled up just after dawn, its windows fogged from the morning chill. Tony stepped out, coat collar turned up, expression unreadable. "You slept?" he asked. She gave a small nod. The bed felt like a cloud, almost forgot what that was. He motioned toward the car. "Mr. Stout wants to see you." Her heart clenched. "Again?" Tony's mouth twitched. He's not exactly the kind of man who likes owing people. Inside, the car hummed softly as they drove through the gray city. The world outside was waking up, delivery trucks rumbling, shop lights flickering to life. But Sarah couldn't stop thinking about why he'd called her back. What could a man like Robert Stout possibly want from a homeless girl with nothing left to lose? When the gates of the mansion opened, she caught herself sitting a little straighter. The marble still gleamed. The guards still stared. The air still carried that quiet weight, like every breath here had to be earned. Tony led her inside, his steps echoing through the hall. Stout was waiting by the window this time, wearing a tailored suit, his bandage gone. He looked restored. Dangerous again. "Miss Means," he said without turning. "You're prompt. I like that." She stopped a few paces behind him. "You didn't really give me a choice." He smiled faintly at the glass. "You'd be surprised. how many people don't come when I call." Her shoulders tensed. "Why did you?" He finally turned to face her. "Because I believe in gratitude, and because I don't like wasted potential." He gestured for her to sit. "Do you know what I do, Sarah?" She hesitated. "You mean besides?" "Besides the stories," he finished for her. "Yes," she shook her head. "I own several legitimate businesses. Real estate, logistics, even a few charities. One of them, a community foundation, is short-staffed. They need someone sharp, organized, trustworthy." He let the word trustworthy hang in the air just long enough to sting. Sarah frowned. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because I want to offer you a job." She blinked. "A job?" "Office assistant. Clean work, decent pay, steady hours." He leaned back in his chair. "You've lived at rock bottom, Sarah. You know what struggle looks like. That's the kind of perspective money can't buy." Sarah's hands tightened around the armrest. "And what's the catch?" "No catch," he said evenly. "No debts, no strings. Just a fresh start." Her instinct screamed disbelief. People didn't offer clean slates, not without expecting something in return. "Why me?" she whispered. "Because you're different," Stout said. "Most people pass by blood and pretend it's rain. You didn't." Behind her, Tony shifted. "Boss," he said quietly, "maybe you should rethink this. Nobody gets something for nothing. Not in this world." Stout's gaze hardened, but his voice stayed calm. "You're right, Tony. They don't. But maybe she's not like this world." He turned back to Sarah. "You can refuse. I won't be offended. But if you walk out that door, you'll go back to a life you've already survived once. How many more times do you think you can?" The words hit harder than she wanted them to. She thought of the alley, the cold, the way hunger scraped against her ribs like guilt. She'd told herself she could keep surviving, but maybe surviving wasn't the same as living. Would you have taken that offer? Or would you have walked away, afraid that salvation came wrapped in a favor? Sarah met Stout's gaze. "All right, I'll take the job." Tony exhaled softly, but Stout smiled, slow and genuine. "Good. I'll have someone bring the details to your room. You start Monday." Sarah stood, unsure whether to thank him or run. "Why are you really doing this?" she asked. Stout's smile faded. His eyes dropped to the photo frame on his desk, the one of a woman and a little girl, their smiles frozen in a happier time. "You remind me of someone I lost," he said quietly. "Someone who believed in good, when the world gave her none." She didn't know what to say. The silence stretched, soft and uneasy. Then he straightened. His voice once again the tone of command. "Get some rest, Miss Means. Monday's a new beginning." As Sarah followed Tony out, the weight of his words lingered. A new beginning, or a new change she couldn't yet see? Only time would tell. Would you have trusted Robert Stout's offer? Or is kindness from a man like him just another kind of trap? If you'd have taken the risk like Sarah, hit subscribe and turn on the bell. Monday came wrapped in nervous rain and the smell of coffee from street vendors. Sarah stood outside a glass building with the words Stout Industries Charity Division etched across the entrance in gold. The building looked like it belonged to another world. Clean, organized, powerful. She tugged at her thrift store blouse, the one she'd washed 3 times just to make it look presentable. Here goes nothing, she muttered, pushing the door open. Inside, everything gleamed. Desks lined up like soldiers, phones ringing softly. The steady hum of business that didn't feel like the streets she'd known all her life. A woman at the front desk looked up. "Can I help you?" I'm Sarah Means. Mr. Stout said—" The woman's eyes widened slightly. "Oh, you're her." Sarah frowned. "Is that bad?" "No," the woman said quickly, forcing a smile. "Just unexpected. Come in." The whispers started almost immediately. People glanced up from their desks, their murmurs low but sharp. She caught fragments. "That's her? The girl he found? Why would he hire a nobody?" She kept walking, head down, pretending not to hear. Tony appeared from a side office, his expression unreadable as always. "You're early," he said. "I couldn't sleep," she admitted. He nodded. "Follow me." He led her through a maze of hallways until they reached a smaller room with 2 desks, a computer, and a window overlooking the city. "This is you," he said. "Paperwork, scheduling, basic admin. Don't touch anything you're not told to." Sarah gave a little half-smile. "I'm not here to steal your secrets." "Good," Tony said, though his eyes didn't soften. "Just remember, this place runs cleaner than most of Stout's world. Keep it that way." She sat down, hands trembling slightly as she powered up the computer. For a long moment, she just watched the cursor blink, a tiny, pulsing start to something new. Would you have believed in a second chance after everything you'd lost? Or would you have waited for the catch? By noon, she was knee-deep in files, requests for aid, donation forms, accounting sheets. She spotted an error in the numbers and quietly fixed it before submitting. No one noticed, but she did. Later that afternoon, an elderly woman came in clutching a form, her hands shaking. "Sweetheart," she said, "they told me I filled this wrong." Sarah smiled gently. "Let's take a look together." She walked her through the form step by step, making sure it was perfect. When they were done, the woman patted her hand. "You've got a kind heart, dear. Don't let this city take it from you." For the first time in months, Sarah smiled for real. Across town, in a corner office overlooking the same skyline, Robert Stout stood watching the rain streak down the window. Tony entered quietly. "She's fitting in," he said. Stout didn't turn. "How are the others taking it?" "Some don't like her. They think she's a charity case." "She's more than that," Stout murmured. "Watch her, but not too closely. She deserves space to breathe." Tony hesitated. "You trust her?" Stout looked out over the city, his city, built on fear and blood. "No," he said quietly. "But I want to." He reached for the photo on his desk, the same one he always did when guilt crept too close. His wife's smile, his daughter's eyes. He whispered, "Maybe she can do what I couldn't." The days blurred into rhythm. Sarah worked hard, stayed quiet, and let her actions speak. Slowly, the whispers changed. People started asking for her help, trusting her judgment. Even Tony seemed less suspicious, though he still lingered by the doorway sometimes, arms crossed. But good things have shadows, and hers arrived one night, long after everyone else had gone home. She was filing reports when she heard voices down the hall, 2 men talking near the back conference room. "Shipments coming in under the charity account," one said. "Boss doesn't know. He doesn't need to." The other chuckled. "If the Morelli family finds out, they'll think it's his move. That's the point." Sarah froze. She didn't understand all of it, but one word stuck. Morelli. She'd heard Tony mention that name before. A rival family. Dangerous. Her pulse quickened. What are they doing? She leaned closer, but the floor creaked beneath her shoe. Silence. Then a door slammed. When she looked up again, the hallway was empty. Sarah stood there, heart racing, staring at the flickering lights above. For the first time since she'd started, she realized the charity wasn't just a second chance, it was a mask. And maybe she wasn't as far from the darkness as she thought. Would you have stayed in that office after hearing that? Or walked out before the truth dragged you in? If you'd want to know what happens next, hit subscribe and turn on the bell, because Sarah's about to discover that even good men can hide terrible secrets. It started with a sound, not the hum of traffic or the echo of city rain this time, but something sharper. A scream. Then an explosion. The windows of the charity office shuddered as chaos broke loose outside. Sarah looked up from her desk, just in time to see black smoke rising in the distance, from the direction of the docks. People ran to the windows, murmuring, panicking. Someone whispered, "It's them." The Morellis hit back. Sarah's stomach dropped. She'd heard that name before, whispered in dark corners, spoken in tones that carried warning. Tony burst through the office doors, his usual calm gone. "Everyone out, now!" "Tony, what's happening?" Sarah asked, her voice shaking. "Trouble," he said shortly, "and you don't want to be anywhere near it." He grabbed her arm, steering her toward the exit, but she stopped. "Robert, Mr. Stout, is he—" Tony hesitated. "He's fine, for now." "For now?" she echoed. He met her eyes. They hit one of his warehouses. He was there. The room tilted for a moment. "Then I have to go to him." Tony shook his head. "No, you stay here. It's not your fight." "But wasn't it?" Sarah pulled her arm free. "He gave me a second chance, Tony. I can't just sit here." He looked at her like she was crazy. "You don't understand what he's built, or what it costs to protect it." "Maybe I don't," she said, her voice rising. "But I understand what it means to not walk away when someone's bleeding out in front of you." That stopped him. For a second, something like respect flickered across his face. "Fine," he muttered. "But if you get killed—" I'm not explaining it to him. They drove through sirens and shattered streets, the air thick with smoke. When the car turned into Stout's estate, the iron gates hung half open, one guard limping and bloodied. "Stay in the car," Tony ordered, but Sarah was already running. The mansion's marble floors were streaked with mud and blood. Men shouted orders, moving fast, their guns drawn. Sarah's heart pounded as she pushed through until she saw him, Robert Stout, sitting in a chair by the fire, just like before. Only this time there was blood on his sleeve, dark and fresh. He looked up when she entered, eyes tired but sharp. "You shouldn't be here." She dropped to her knees beside him. "You said that the last time, too." He managed a faint smile. "And you didn't listen then, either." "Hold still," she said, tearing a strip from her sleeve. Her hands shook as she pressed it against his wound. "You're lucky this isn't worse." "Lucky," he murmured. "I lost 3 men tonight." "Then don't make it 4. For a long moment, there was only the crackle of the fire and her steady breathing as she worked. "You could have run," he said quietly. Sarah didn't look up. "You told me not to disappear." His hand found hers, weak but steady. "I say a lot of things, Miss Means. Not all of them worth repeating." She glanced at him. This one was. Something in his expression shifted then. and the steel mask slipping just enough for her to see the man beneath it. The one who wasn't made of marble and power. He exhaled, long and heavy. "You don't know what I've done, Sarah. The people I've buried, the lines I've crossed. Every good thing I ever touched, I destroyed. My wife, my daughter, gone because of this life." Sarah froze. "Your daughter?" He nodded, gaze distant. "She was your age, kind, brighter than I deserved. They took her to hurt me." His voice broke on the last word. For a man like Robert Stout, that was a confession more dangerous than any crime. She pressed her hand over his. "You can't undo what's been done. But maybe you can do something that matters now." He looked at her like she was something impossible, hope, dressed in rags. "Do you really think a man like me can still do good?" he asked. Sarah met his eyes. "You already did. You saved me." He didn't answer. Just let out a sound halfway between a laugh and a sob. Outside, the sirens wailed again, but in that room, the world was quiet. Two people, one broken by violence, one mended by kindness, sat in the ruins of an empire built on fear. Would you have gone back for him? Risked everything for a man the world called a monster? Sarah didn't see a monster anymore. Just a man who'd finally stopped pretending not to bleed. If you'd have stood by him like Sarah did, hit subscribe and turn on the bell, because what happens next will test both their faith and their limits. Redemption always comes with a price. The city looked different when you had hope in your pocket. It had been a week since the attack. 7 long days since Sarah had knelt beside Robert Stout's blood again, holding on to life for both of them. The mansion had quieted, the tension thinning like smoke after a storm. Stout had recovered enough to walk with a cane, though the weight he carried wasn't just from injury. Sarah hadn't seen him since that night. Part of her thought she never would again. Maybe that was for the best. She'd done her part, and whatever debt existed between them felt settled. But fate, it seemed, had other plans. It started with the low hum of engines. Sarah was sitting in her alley, back against the same wall where everything began, when the sound made her look up. Black cars, sleek, silent, unstoppable, sliding into the narrow street like shadows returning home. For a heartbeat, fear hit her gut. But this time, there was no menace in the air. The men who stepped out didn't move like predators. They moved with purpose. Boxes followed. Wooden crates stamped with Stout Industries. Sarah stood slowly, frowning. "What is this?" "Deliveries," one man said, smiling faintly as he lifted a box of canned food. Another carried a folded bed frame. Another, new clothes. The alley, her forgotten corner of the world, filled with the sound of work. Then a final car door opened. Robert Stout stepped out, leaning slightly on a black cane. His suit was immaculate, but his eyes, those steel-gray eyes, had softened. "Mr. Stout?" Sarah breathed. He smiled. "I told you not to disappear." "I wasn't exactly hiding." "No," he said, scanning the alley, "but you were surviving. That's not the same as living." He stopped in front of her. The rain hadn't started yet, but the air smelled like it would. "You gave me your last $12, Sarah," he said quietly. "Now, I'm giving you your life back." He handed her a small envelope and a brass key. She stared at it, confused. "What's this?" "The key is to an apartment downtown. Paid for. The letter is your employment contract. Legitimate, steady pay. You'll be working with one of my charity divisions. Full benefits. No strings." Her fingers trembled as she opened the envelope. Alongside the letter was a check, $50,000. She blinked, sure she was imagining it. "This can't be real." "It's as real as the night you saved me," he said. She whispered. "Why would you do this?" He looked away, his gaze distant. "Because I've built a world on debts and power, and it's made me forget what generosity looks like. You reminded me." "But I don't want charity," she said, voice catching. "It's not charity," he said firmly. "It's a start. A foundation, for you and others like you." He paused, watching her reaction. "Use the money to build something. Call it whatever you want." She looked down at the check, the bold signature glinting in the dim light. A thought sparked in her chest, small, fragile, and powerful. "The 12 Fund," she said softly, his brow furrowed. "The 12 Fund? For the $12 that changed everything," she said. "It's a reminder that even the smallest act can turn the world on its head." For the first time since she'd met him, Robert Stout's smile wasn't the practiced one of a man used to winning. It was genuine. "You didn't save me for money, Sarah," he said quietly. "You saved me because you still believed humanity existed." He lifted his gaze to hers. "I needed to believe that too." Sarah felt tears burning at the corners of her eyes. "I just did what anyone should do." "Then maybe," he said, "you're what this city needs. Proof that not everyone's forgotten how to care." The men finished unloading, leaving her surrounded by possibility. Food, clothes, furniture, a key, and a future she hadn't dared imagine. Stout turned to leave, his cane tapping softly against the pavement. "Make it count," he said over his shoulder. Sarah watched him go, her breath trembling. The same alley that had once been her cage now felt like a doorway. Would you have taken that gift? Or would you have turned it down, afraid of what it meant to owe a man like him? She clutched the key, smiling faintly through her tears. "I guess it's time to start living." If you believe one act of kindness can rewrite a life, hit subscribe and turn on the bell, because Sarah's story isn't over yet. In the final chapter, she'll discover that some debts are repaid not with money, but with meaning. The winter air carried the scent of rain and redemption. Downtown, a modest office building bore a new name on its glass door: the 12 Fund. Inside, sunlight streamed through the windows as Sarah Means moved between desks, greeting her small team of staff and volunteers. The place buzzed with quiet purpose, phones ringing, papers shuffling, laughter echoing down the hall. A boy, no older than 16, stood at the front desk, clutching a backpack. "You really help people find jobs?" he asked. Sarah smiled. "That's the plan. We help you find work, a place to sleep, and people who care enough to stick around." The boy blinked, like he wasn't sure whether to believe her. "Start with a meal," she said softly. "Then we'll talk." As he followed a volunteer to the kitchen, Sarah turned to the framed photo on her office wall. It showed the alley, her alley, now painted and cleaned, with the words, "The 12 Fund." Because small kindness changes everything, printed below. Would you have imagined this ending for her? The girl who once slept under an overpass, now helping others climb out of the same darkness. The news caught up to her eventually. Headlines spread across the city. Homeless woman saves Mafia boss, builds charity to repay kindness. From the streets to a savior. The Sarah Means story. Reporters called daily. TV crews wanted interviews. She turned most of them down. "It's not about me," she'd say. It's about what comes next. But there was one person she hadn't heard from in months, the man who started it all. Until one rainy afternoon, Tony appeared in her doorway. "Still can't shake you, huh?" Sarah teased. He smirked. "You're harder to avoid than the IRS. He wants to see you." Sarah's heart skipped. "Robert?" Tony nodded. "He's different these days. You'll see." The mansion wasn't what it used to be. The guards were fewer, the air quieter. The gold and marble still gleamed, but there was something gentler about the place now, as if the ghosts had finally been given rest. Robert Stout sat by the same fire where they'd first spoken, his cane resting beside him. He looked older, softer somehow. "Miss Means," he said with a faint smile. "You've been busy." Sarah laughed. "So have you. I heard you've been selling off your business interests." He nodded. "The legitimate ones will stay. The others, it's time they end." "Just like that?" she asked. He looked into the fire. "Nothing that easy ever happens just like that. But I've spent my life building walls of fear. You taught me that compassion breaks stronger." Sarah sat across from him. "Maybe we both got saved that night." "Maybe we did," he said quietly. For a while, they sat in companionable silence. The storm outside whispered against the windows. Finally, he spoke again. "Do they know?" "Who?" "The people you help. Do they know where their funding comes from?" Sarah shook her head. "They don't need to. Some things are better left in the dark." He chuckled softly. "Then maybe I've finally done something good in secret. My wife would have liked that." "She'd be proud of you," Sarah said. He met her gaze. "No, she'd be proud of you." Weeks later, Sarah walked down the street toward her old alley. The rain had stopped, but the pavement still shimmered. The once crumbling wall now held a small bronze plaque she'd commissioned with her first donation. She brushed her fingers over the engraving. "Here, kindness changed everything." Her reflection rippled faintly in the wet stone, her eyes soft with memory. "You told me not to disappear," she whispered. "Guess I didn't." Behind her, the city stirred. Cars, voices, life. But here, in this quiet corner, the world paused. Would you have believed one choice, one act, one $12 decision could echo this far? Sarah smiled, slipping her hands into her coat pockets. As she walked away, the camera of her story lingered, on the plaque, on the empty alley, and on the faint sound of rain beginning to fall once more. Because some stories don't end. They ripple forward, carried by every person brave enough to care when the world says don't. If you believe kindness still matters, hit subscribe and share Sarah's story. Because compassion might not fix the whole world, but it can change someone's. And sometimes, that's enough.